Now we're going to take you from the more abstract models that you've created one step closer to creating the actual screens of your application. And this step is about thinking about the overall information architecture of how your system will flow, thinking about the use cases that users will perform in your application, and thinking about how that use case would flow from one screen to another as users try to complete those tasks. And it's important at this point to think about the operating system that you're targeting for your application. iOS, Android, Windows Phone, they all have very different styles of interaction. So studying those systems, understanding how those systems present information, architect information, is important to getting to your structure of your system. Some operating systems have a menu that you slide out from the left-hand side. Some have explicit menu buttons that you should click on to get additional information. Some are more tab-based. Some are more visual with large fonts and large images with smaller or fewer navigational items. So really look through some of the apps that are on your phone before starting this step and see how you interact with them, because you want to make sure that your app works in the style of the system that you are targeting. You can just see some examples here from a system we built several years ago at Motorola, seeing how the Android version has these large tabs towards the top to interact, to switch between the different views. iOS has these little panels on the bottom that work very similar to tabs, but look very different. And there's an explicit back button up on the top of the interface. And BlackBerry has an even different style of interaction. So thinking a bit about your platform, thinking about how information is presented in the standard apps on your platform will give you a good foundation to thinking about the structure and flow of the app that you're about to create. Also thinking about different overall navigation patterns on the device. Like on Android, you always have a back button available to you, either in hardware or always displayed on the bottom of the screen. So thinking about that navigation, thinking about how having a back button will let you navigate between screens, and what back really means. If people are switching between tabs, should back take them to the last tab they were on? Should it take them completely out of that screen and back to the home screen or whatever they were doing before? Thinking through these things as you design your screens and your flows is extremely important. Thinking about the different types of interactions on list items. What does a touch mean? What does a long press mean? What does a swipe mean? Different platforms have different conventions for this. If you swipe an item off to the left, are you deleting it? Are you sharing it? Just think about what the different gestures mean, and think about ways that users will be able to figure out what gestures are possible on any given item, right? How many pixels should someone have to move their finger such that an item starts sliding out to the side and that's discoverable, but not too much so that they're doing it accidentally. So think about those aspects of design. Think about things like the action bar on Android or a multi-pane layout on Android that has callouts and other things as you're designing your screens. So before we get to the actual screen design, let's think about what your system does. What are the use cases? What tasks will your users need to perform? And that functionality should match to the user goals. And user goals can be very short-term. It could be, I want to take a picture. It could be a social goal. It could be, I want to take a picture of this thing I'm seeing and share it with my best friend right now. It could be an experience goal. It could be, I want to be happy right now, and I want to get music that's going to make me happy, is going to put me in this mood that I want to be in. Or I want to watch something that's funny. I want to have a laugh around some hilarious YouTube clip, right? So you could have experience goals. And you can have life goals. You can have goals for using an application like Serendipitous Stories, where someone might want to feel closer to their grandparent or their parent. They might want to feel more connected to their grandchildren. And the reasons that they're coming to the system are for those larger life goals, more than an explicit experience goal of, I want to capture a video right now. they're really doing to share something across generations. And so when you're thinking of use cases, think about those larger goals that are more than just the explicit, I need to do X function in X app at X time. Really think about why people are coming to your system in the first place. So there are a variety of ways to think about how your system should be structured. Cooper's interaction framework is one way to think about this, thinking about the form factor of the device and input methods, different views that you need to create on the data in the application, the functional and data elements that are in the system. What pieces of content do you need to show? How do those pieces of content need to be manipulated? Thinking about if there's a natural hierarchy. If you think about browsing music, there's kind of this nice hierarchy of artist, album, song title. If your domain has an explicit hierarchy, making that representative in the interface and the way that people interact can make it much more understandable. Thinking about what your interaction framework begins to look like. What are the pieces, and how do those pieces relate to each other? How do people flow from one piece to another? And then thinking about some key path scenarios. So think about the use cases that people need to perform, and think about how those chain together. Think about what series of screens people need to go through so that they can accomplish a task. And hopefully for tasks that people accomplish quite frequently, that series is fairly short. People don't need to go through 10 screens or 20 button pushes to do something that's very frequent in your app. So this isn't a linear process. As you're thinking of the structure, as you're designing the screens, going back and forth between them is extremely important. When you design a screen and then you see what people might actually have to do to interact with it, you might want to break it out into 2 screens, or you might want to collapse some screens together to make the system design overall much more simple and understandable for your users. The flows that you create will show movement through time. So think about each use case that your user needs to perform, what are the steps along the way, and draw out that flow. Draw out that sequence of 3 or 4 screens, or maybe even just 1 screen, that someone would need to interact with to accomplish a particular task. So the place to start is with use cases. And this just shows a bunch of the use cases that we came up with when we were designing the social phone book that we talked about at the intro lecture for today. And you can see there are a lot of use cases here. Simple things like calling a contact or text messaging a contact, but then more complex things, seeing a social update about a friend, being able to communicate back from that social update via a variety of different means, right? So if you see a Flickr photo from your friend, you could respond with a text message, or you could respond with a Facebook message, or you could respond with a phone call. These are some of the lower level use cases that we created for the system. And then we had higher level use cases around just learning about your friends, or checking up on someone to see what they've been up to lately, or seeing what their latest updates were across a variety of services. So if you can stop right now and think about those use cases, think about the larger life goals that people are trying to accomplish when they come to your system, and then think about the smaller tasks that they need to do in order to accomplish those goals. Creating a video, saving a video, sharing a video, seeing a list of music, picking a particular song to play, picking a particular playlist to play, playing that, pausing it, fast forwarding past a song. These are the kinds of use cases that you'll want to think about as you create that list. And in the next lecture, we'll get you to turning those use cases into the actual structure and flow of an application.